And Mike, I want to talk broadly tonight and more philosophically about what I see as a genuine civilizational shift, a pivot, if you will, that I think is taking place all over the world, but in this country, certainly led by President Trump and the MAGA movement. And it's one that is inexorably moving forward, and it seems to have taken on a kind of a critical mass. I don't think that it can be reversed. And in a nutshell, what it is the reassertion of sovereignty on a national, regional, local, and individual basis, and a world, I don't want to use the word world order, but world situation by which there's a rejection of the internationalist, transnationalist, informal, private banking establishment that really it was exemplified by Cecil Rhodes in his Anglo-American establishment. People might know that I have the book Tragedy and Hope propped up behind me on my desk here, written by Professor Carol Quigley of Georgetown University. He talked about his involvement in this Anglo-American establishment, which was established by Cecil Rhodes at the turn of the 20th century, where there would be an informal world order controlled by unelected, unaccountable bureaucrats, dynasties, family members, bloodlines, multinational corporate people, and that nations would serve sort of as window dressing. Ultimately, that would also apply to religions, it would apply to the culture. And basically, we all would sort of think that we have sovereignty, but sovereignty would ultimately come from the top down. I think that's changing. I think that we are moving into an era of sovereignty in all its aspects, and that we see it happening in this country under President Trump's leadership. What say you, Mike?
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that sort of thing, the Cecil Rhodes approach, was referred to back in the early 1960s as, quote, one world government or one worldism.
Yes.
And was dismissed, by the way, as the John Birch Society, as conspiracy theorists.
Right.
Although, as I keep pointing out to my friends and enemies, John Stormer was able to sell 7 million copies of a book called None Dare Call It Treason, which
Yes.
he personally published. And that's well before the internet or really mass communication outside the conventional broadcast networks. So people were talking about this back then and probably earlier than that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and Stormer basically showed, and the other book was None Dare Call It Conspiracy. These books were huge without any promotion, and they were denounced. But yet, as you say, millions of copies flew all over the world. And what their premise was just what I mentioned. I mean, that Cecil Rhodes, his secret society, the Rhodes Roundtable, gave birth to the Council on Foreign Relations in New York, the Chatham House in London, and then several satellites around the world, and that their basic agenda was to engage in perpetual war for perpetual peace,
right,
as it was called by historian Harry Elmer Barnes in his book of that name. And that the idea being to wear down sovereignty, make profits, centralize power, increase control into the hands of this amoral, power-hungry, megalomaniacal elite, and that the UN was eventually envisioned to be the world government. World War I, I mean, the year 1912 was pivotal because an avowed and open socialist by the name of Woodrow Wilson was elected in a very questionable election, by the way. And that immediately you had World War I, which was this kind of conflagration of powers as a way to weaken sovereignty. Now, eventually it led to the break, the smaller nations becoming sovereign. And it sort of backfired ultimately because Massachusetts Senator Henry Cabot Lodge stood up to it and said, we're not joining their League of Nations. And if people look at what the League of Nations originally stood for, it was world government. There's no question.
Yeah.
But it all came back with another world war, World War II, also very connived and very planned. And that after that, you had the Cold War, then you had the war on terror, then you had the war on everything, the war on cancer, the war on drug use, all these wars. And they all serve to further centralize power and transfer power away from governments. The governments would basically be doing the bidding of this informal power structure. And I think that now with President Trump, the first president since probably Coolidge, actually, but a much stronger personality than Coolidge, has stood up and really launched a movement and led a movement. We have an increasing awareness that this massive edifice, this blob that sort of interferes in all of our lives, exists, and it is not in the interests of the sovereign individual under God. It is not consonant with our constitutional understanding of things, that rights come from the creator and not from the state. And that we are now involved in, and I want to get into current events, the exposure of massive fraud that most of us have known about. Certainly, John Stormer wrote about it in Under Color Treason, where you have billions, if not trillions, of taxpayer dollars transferred to these corrupt, rotten, internationally oriented organizations that basically live high on the hog and do nothing noticeable in terms of trying to address these things. And now it's becoming so bad. We've talked about the war on poverty and how that cost conservatively $30 trillion. And did it solve anything other than make a lot of, fancy people rich, and set up more institutions where they can study poverty at trillions of dollars? But now you have it so blatant with the exposure by people like citizen journalist Nick Shirley in Minneapolis, showing the Somalians, who I think are just pawns, really, basically shipping away billions of dollars in cash in suitcases to Somalia over a long period of time. And while they establish these phony front organizations that are supposed to be daycare centers, you now have in Los Angeles the same phenomena, except in Los Angeles, it's the Armenians who are involved. So you can't say that it's racist, because I think last I checked, Armenians are white. They come from the Caucasus, and that they're involved in this multi-billion-dollar hospice scam. I don't know if you've been hearing about this.
Yeah.
It's
I
bigger.
mean, there's places you could go, and I think there were some YouTube videos on this where I believe it was Nick Shirley came to LA, went to one building that was headquartering God knows how many dozen of these home healthcare outfits.
Right.
And
Dr. Oz has now shown up, and and it's interesting that Los Angeles gets 18% of all of the money that's supposed to go to hospice, and yet, it doesn't have that many elderly people. I mean, compared to like Florida or New York or, other areas. And it's an obvious fraud. And it's, is it true also that Newsom, I think in 2019, earmarked something like $3 billion to deal with the homeless problem?
Yeah.
The money disappeared. The point is that this has been going on for a long time. This is every bit a part of this Rhodes Scholarship, the internationalist movement to transfer power away from government by these nondescript, phony NGOs who sit around and they twiddle about, whatever, I don't know, in this case.
Is it your contention that from the beginning, Rhodes thought of this as essentially a criminal organization?
Yes.
To enrich himself and others? Okay.
That's part of it. I mean, it was to concentrate wealth it was to coordinate with central bankers, but it was also power. It was they would leave in place governments, and the governments would there would be a revolving door between governments and their secretive non-governmental organizations. The first and the biggest one was the Council on Foreign Relations in New York. Every Secretary of State practically has been a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. I don't think Marco Rubio is, but and there were a couple of others who weren't, but most of them since World War II have been. And that it's a secret society in New York that is involved in this perpetual war for perpetual peace policy. Their ideas and their amoral philosophies are fairly well described in their scholarly journal, Foreign Affairs. You can read it. I've read it. It has articles about what to do about this, that, and the other thing, and it usually involves war, and yeah, right, and setting up these phony wars, and these NGOs which affiliate with the UN. We know from the immediately once Trump entered office, the first scandal was USAID, which was involved, like 10% of it was actually involved in helping anybody. And even then, who knows, like humanitarian aid. The rest of it was going not only to political color revolutions for governments that they didn't want and that weren't playing ball with this international order, but also American politicians, American left-wing and corrupt organizations and causes, and ultimately an American color revolution, which is now financing this completely irrational attack on ICE agents in Minneapolis, which are trying to apprehend serious criminals, cartels, drug gangs, to get them off the street, and is doing it. Somehow people have been whipped up into thinking that there's something wrong with that. And they're spending huge amounts of money, taxpayer money, on making that happen. But I think it's starting to, I think that between now and the next election in November, which is really only 7 or 8 months away, there is evidence that people are waking up, including a lot of liberals. Even here in Massachusetts, there's rumblings. We have a Republican candidate for governor who's actually not too bad, Joe Shortsleeve, who's bringing things up, and he's pretty good at it. And that we have a state where the state has overspent the budget by $2.5 billion. And that's a lot of money for a small state. And there we have a governor and an attorney general and, the whole rotten state house that are refusing to talk about what happened to that money. They will not release information about it. And even though we have a state auditor, Diane DeZoglio, who ran on the platform that she would do a full audit of the state. And they said, no, you're not doing it. So then she got a proposal on the ballot, a referendum to further back that, and that won overwhelmingly, and they still aren't doing it. They have
I think what's happening, you mentioned an interesting point, that there are liberals that are now jumping on the bandwagon.
Right.
Because think of this, Chuck, if you were really a true believer in all this liberal bleeding heart crap, and you're paying your tax money, and you honestly thought that it was doing some good, and now you suddenly wake up like Rip Van Winkle and discover that it was all crap, it was all a smokescreen, I suspect that you're going to be hit maybe even harder than, diehard conservatives like us.
Right. You would think conventionally, but the main card that they're playing, and they're doing it using a Chinese water torture tactic, drip, 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 is that it's enough to go on Trump hatred. This bizarre, irrational, demented hatred for President Trump that they've been able to inculcate after year after year of lies and propaganda.
I think that's starting to turn a corner.
You do?
Because
okay.
I've seen too many, and I watch too many of these debates or whatnot, and you're seeing people on our side, or even not as far right as we are, when someone will bring up this Trump, you'll people say, doesn't work anymore.
I hope you're right, and I think you are right. I mean, even like I was watching some of the congressional testimony where they were interviewing Scott Bessent, who is one of the best secretaries of the Treasury, probably since Hamilton. I mean, he understands economics, and he handles himself well. I mean, in the face of such hostility. And of course, he had Elizabeth Warren, the ultimate Karen, if there ever was one, using the same old tired tactics. How can President Trump said that transparency is a hoax and all this crap, and Besson is so cool. He's like, well, he was talking about what the media is saying, that's not what he's saying, and that he was talking about the hoax of the last regime. And she was just she couldn't finish. This is my time. I'm claiming my time. She couldn't really.
But she had nothing to say. I mean, she was bringing up the old talking points.
The old crap. I mean, people aren't buying that kind of approach. It's so like.
The thing that makes Besson stand above the others is he's the first Secretary of the Treasury in a long time, let's be honest, who was actually qualified. I mean, most of these guys were big money Wall Street dudes. Okay, great. But I'm not sure what that has to do with the Treasury of the United States,
Right. They do an economic philosophy. I mean, Trump has people, I mean, look at RFK Jr. He has a philosophy about health that he's been working for many, many decades. And it's more than just usually the political hack, they'll put Pete Buttigieg in there, some guy who ran a small city as a mayor.
And not very well.
No, and it's a city smaller than Quincy, where I
South Bend, Indiana.
And he's supposed to be up there with transportation. Trump hasn't done that. He has people who actually understand, the issues that they're in charge of. I mean, Dr. Oz, I mean, these people actually, they've spent time going deep into these issues. I mean, we can go off on a tangent here for a second. All right. Are there people that actually believe so strongly in identity politics that it's okay that we have a little gay boy from South Bend, Indiana, and that's enough? Yeah, well, that doesn't know anything. The only thing he ever accomplished was that he was gay. Yeah. Or you have like a David Deacon. What about Liz Warren? The only thing was he was black. I mean, there was nothing other than that. It was a complete disaster. But he's going to go down as a great man because he was the first black man elected mayor of New York. Meanwhile, you have Mamdani. I mean, the thing has completely flopped. He goes on about reforming homelessness as a way by not in any way picking people up off the street during cold snaps or bad weather and just leaving everybody alone. And Adams, as he was leaving office, said, this is going to be a disaster. People are going to die. Sure enough, we have a cold snap. 35 people froze to death in New York City. And Mamdani, he doesn't understand that blood is on his hands because he stopped pulling people into shelters. And yet, somehow they continue to just roll on like that. And nobody, they're like, I think that it's such a disconnect between reality, actually, and then when I think you're being too kind here. I think it's beyond a disconnect. I think it's actually demonic to the extent that it doesn't matter what these results are. There's all these bodies piling up. There's all these trillions of dollars being wasted. Well, I don't care. No, and now you have this guy who was a cop who was stabbed by this absolute insane maniac. And so he stopped him after trying to stand back. You can see the video. I mean, he stopped him by shooting him. And now all of a sudden, Mamdani, I feel for the family of this guy and he's going to let him off. And somebody, a reporter again asked him, like, what do you mean? I mean, he stabbed a cop. He was probably going to kill people if he wasn't immobilized. And so his answer is classic leftist answer. Well, we're going to have to study this. We need to have another study. They're going to do another study on homelessness. Didn't Newsom just spend $5 billion studying homelessness? It's like it hasn't ever been studied before.
Well, it's funny. It's funny you mentioned that, okay, because that almost crystallizes to why I hate academia so much. Because it's basically about navel gazing. No problems are ever solved. And as I know, because I was involved, unfortunately, with some very elite educational institutions, if you did occasionally encounter the guy that was doing something practical, he was despised by the rest of the faculty.
Right.
And that's a fact. For the very reason that, oh, God forbid, Corey Mullis is actually doing something useful. Or Willard Libby, who I work for, who invented carbon-14 dating. Oh, gee, Willard Libby did something useful.
Right.
And the rest, I'm telling you, the rest probably hated the guy. And he got even, when he got his Nobel Prize, which was before he came to UCLA, but it was the same thing. That other people are just doing literally what the adjective is, academic type stuff.
Well, it's just, it goes back. I mean, I'm studying sociology and mental health right now is one of my issues this week. And it goes back, as I've said, to making, creating mental issues, that before were not seen as a problem. It's called medicalization. I was going to bring this up today. It's, that basically back in the day, if people had emotional problems, so they would not, today they'd probably put them on drugs and call them mental. It just was seen as somebody who had some issues, and the family would take care of it. The community would take care of it. They would be given basically functions that were commensurate to their intellectual level, and nobody would really make an issue out of it. It just was normal. It wasn't like they're mentally ill, unless somebody was serious, could not. If you were functional in society, you were not thought of as mentally ill. You were just, maybe they had some unkind words for it, but the point is, it wasn't like people put in institutions and labeled and medicalized. And then, this interesting sociologist, Irving Goffman, who I actually think is quite cool, he said that, once you put labels on people, they start conforming to that label. And eventually it becomes their identity, right? I am a depressive, when depression is a normal thing in most cases, unless it becomes debilitating, because things in life can be depressing. There are things that are angering. Depression is nothing.
We used to joke about my mother would be depressed, and it was like everybody was trying to medicalize this, as you say. And my response, look, she actually has a lot to be depressed about. Things happen in life and so on. But when you turn it into a project, and in that project you could sell drugs and you could pay for psychiatric time and so on.
And it becomes an industry.
By the way, it never did her any good. All right.
No.
Let's be honest about that.
No.
So
it doesn't.
So it's just amazing. We have to study that, right? Okay.
Well, it's
because they have no answers, and they're afraid to say, because it goes counter to their Marxist philosophy, of which there's always an oppressor and a victim. Now, in the case of this stabbing guy, it reversed it, and their head explodes. Which is exactly
the guy brutally stabbing the cop, and probably if nothing was done, he would have gone on a rampage. He's the victim. He's in the hospital, and I think, did Modami visit him in the hospital? I don't know, but it was.
Look, I mean, it's exactly all these people that are complaining about these victims of ICE that were killed, Renee Good and this Alex Pretty guy. You didn't hear word one about Laken Riley and all these other women that were killed by illegal aliens for the same reason. The narrative shifts. Okay, no, Laken Riley was a white girl, so she must be the oppressor. And They
And
don't know how to deal with it.
even worse than that, in the case of Good and Freddie, they were doing what I probably would have been shot if I had done. They were interfering with a police action where they were
Of course.
arresting a drug gang member. They were arresting a dangerous drug cartel person who was here illegally, and they were stepping in between and trying to stop it from happening using, real violence. I mean, I think she was like trying to hit him with her car, and he
Right.
was there kicking the car and yelling and spitting. If I had done that or you had done that to a cop, we could have been shot. I mean, it's not like they were just innocent
Well, here's the
bystanders.
other thing. If you had done that or I had done that, no one would be crying any crocodile tears for us because we're not part of this organized
Right.
Antifa movement. But,
Well,
it's interestingly, I think it was 3 years ago, there was a kind of a tragic death locally here where some hot-headed Jewish guy got into an argument with some Muslim character when there was a demonstration against. I mean, there were Jews on one side and
Right.
Arab sympathizers on the other, and it was getting a little hot. It was right here at Thousand Oaks, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, there's pushing and shoving. This, for lack of a better term, Arab guy pushes back on the Jewish guy. He falls, hits his head, and dies. All right. It was obviously not intentional, but he's dead.
Right.
Okay. Now you're asking yourself, wait a minute. Okay, nobody wanted this guy to die, but what the hell is wrong with you that you're going to get into such an argument at a street protest that you're going to put your own life in danger like that? I mean, what is the mentality here?
And you're stepping out there, right? Exactly. And I mean, I don't have a lot of sympathy. I mean, look, if they want to sit there and protest some stupid, they're claiming it's terrible that ICE is there trying to basically rid their community of gangs, then let them just stand on the sidewalk like they do in Boston, or in Newton. You have people that look like they're 90 years old standing there with some stupid sign. I don't care. Honestly,
Well, that's what's called in the Constitution peaceful assembly.
Yeah.
That's it. There's no right to, in that sense, violently protest. It's peaceful.
They're trying to goad and they're trying to instigate an incident. They want to get another George Floyd kind of a deal going, I think. And the media is jumping on that. I don't think it's worked. I think that now at this point it's starting to turn. And I think that between the fact that you have people by the thousands trying to sign up to work for ICE, you have ICE funding already baked in so they can't take it away, that you have a reduction in violent crime in the areas where they are operating. They are getting the criminals off the street. They are deporting people. I understand that in Minneapolis, didn't they deport almost 10,000 people already?
Well, they were talking about 3,000 or 4,000, violent criminals.
Right.
So it's working.
And also that when they deport illegal aliens, those jobs are then taken by oftentimes men and women of color, who have not had a place.
Well, that's it, Chuck. How many black people do you see out there protesting in Minneapolis?
Now, you remember Barbara Jordan, right? From Texas.
Oh, God. Yeah, yes.
About her in her defense. She was assigned during the Clinton era as a congresswoman, head of a committee to investigate what to do about illegal aliens and immigration. And she spent a year studying it and taking testimony. And eventually she issued a report called the Barbara Jordan Report, where she came down like a ton of bricks. Immediate expulsion and deportation for illegal aliens, a tightening of the border, an end to birthright, an end to the lottery. And it was not
I didn't know that birthright was in there. I didn't know that.
And it was not expected. And I think that it kind of got buried. I mean, it sort of was, oh my God, people assumed, well, this is a black woman, so she must be on the left. But she wasn't on the left. She was a conservative. The only reason they
Well,
thought,
especially by today's standards.
yeah, I mean, and even like when she spoke at the Democratic convention, she's the first person to get up and talk about what she called political correctness. She was a
Yeah.
great speaker. I mean, she really knew how to, deliver thoughts. So she wasn't quite fitting the mold of what black women are supposed to be, and so they kind of buried that. But people need to understand that the reason why she took that position, besides the fact that I do think that she was basically a patriot and she wasn't on the left. And by the way, it's disgusting, just a little sidebar, that after she died, you had radicals out her as a lesbian. Did you know that?
I seem to recall that actually. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's so bad because she obviously didn't want her private life to be discussed. And that went by the wayside for political reasons. We could, look at this. They held her up. Putting that aside, the point is that she took that position because she wanted to protect labor and she wanted to protect minorities, people who would have had these jobs that were going because you had the big multinational corporations shipping in cheap labor, semi-slave labor from foreign countries, so that they could get profits. I mean, isn't that what the left wing is supposed to be against? Aren't they like railing? I remember my late mother and father-in-law, real commies, real hardcore, talk about corporate, this and corporations there, and everything was these conspiracy by corporate interests. Well, corporate interests are what swung open the border so they could get cheap labor and cut out black people.
Well, okay, but it's interesting that you're talking about that generation. I would say, I mean, I never liked all that left-wing crap, but at least they were honest. What happened is those people are not in the movement anymore. Instead, it's white suburban women who it's not really an issue. They
have no idea and they don't care. They just, it's not rational anymore, and it's become like the old left. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, but the point is that this issue used to be a liberal issue. Bill Clinton actually did do a good deal of deporting. And even Obama apparently had a fairly good record on this. I mean, he gave an award, a Presidential Medal of Freedom, to Tom Homan.
Yeah.
His pictures are making the rounds of him putting the award on his neck, and this is my guy, and he's great, and he deported this number of people this year. And all of a sudden, all of that's gone down
the narrative on the left always kind of changes. Now, as we say, their main candidates seem to be old hippies from the 60s, angry suburban white women, of which there are apparently a lot. But the old issue of labor being exploited and so on, I mean, that died out, and that died out in the mid 60s when you first saw the expression "the new left."
Right,
and that's when it switched. That's when it frankly became openly anti-Semitic, by the way.
Right, and anti-left because you had the hard hats. The rank and file Teamsters people were very much anti-hippie, and they wanted benefits and they wanted to represent their interests, and they generally are supporters of Trump, even that the leadership isn't, of course. They completely.
Well, the Democrat Party lost its soul, so now all they can do is cheat. They got nothing to offer, and as the corruption, which you and I knew always existed, but now is being exposed on this massive scale. And by the way, why does it take Nick Shirley and his friend, what is the guy's name, David that he goes around with? What does it take these two guys? What about all the media?
They haven't done this. I mean, like 60 Minutes started out doing this when you had like Mike Wallace, right?
Yeah.
He would chase somebody down the street with a microphone. They don't do that anymore. Now they just sit.
Well, even Mike Wallace was a phony because the targets were always the same. He never went after left-wing people.
No, yeah, he was a complete fraud. But the point is that you know, we don't even need to talk about them. I mean, that's obviously part of the problem, and they are seen now more and more for just the liars that they are. I think President Trump has done an amazing job of calling them out. You know, he's like, hey, this is fake news. I mean, you know, you guys are just.
He must be rejoicing now because John Nolte, I didn't know all the gory details, but John Nolte in Breitbart put out a thing a couple of days ago. The Washington Post laid off 300 people.
Oh, they're like.
They're not going to have a sports department. Basically, it really, you know, they were joking and call it the Jeff Bezos blog, but it's really becoming that.
Oh,
because he decided to stop writing the checks.
Good old Marty Barron, formerly of the Boston Globe. I remember meeting him at a function when I was running for office, and he said, "It's Mr. Barron to you," you know. And he's
really?
You know, yeah. I mean, there hasn't been an establishment ass that he hasn't kissed in his life. I mean, it's just a real functionary of the, you know, they've done nothing. I mean, they're just complete protectors of this rotten liberal establishment. And now he's there saying, because he's the editor of the Washington Post, he's like, this is the worst thing to happen in history all of a sudden, you know. Like,
well, all these people are, you know, you see all these letters. Like there was a big article in the Atlantic, your favorite publication.
Oh, yeah.
This is vandalism of civilization or whatever. Okay, you know what? You step up and pay for a losing enterprise if it's so important.
Yeah, I mean, they're just reading out. And I think that all of these factors, you have the awareness, the undeniable awareness of the kind of corruption that is going on in, you know, these big cities, even in some of the red states, by the way, they're not immune to this. I mean, Florida has some major stuff going on where you have billions of taxpayer money being shipped overseas, being pocketed, Medicare, Medicaid fraud, Social Security, unemployment fraud. All of it is so rotten. And they can see that Trump is trying to point it out and that he's being stopped by these really corrupt judges. You now have, at least locally, you've got a lot of these left-wing judges even, and local politicians are now being convicted and are going to jail. Even here, right here in Boston, we have Monica Gannon. She was the head of the local BLM, real radical, you know, kind of radical social services. She's just been convicted. I know they gave her a slap on the wrist, but she took hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash out of BLM and lived an openly lavish lifestyle. You've got, you know, besides Ilhan Omar, I know she's an obvious target, having a phony winery where I think she took $5 million and other things. But it's now starting to come out, and a lot of these people, including Ayanna Pressley, I know I've talked about her in Boston. You know, she's one of the squad. I thought it was $4 million that her husband, former convicted ex-con, you know, drug dealer, spent 10 years in prison. The minute she's elected, you know, two or 3 days before she takes office, he sets up a consulting firm and they get $4 million or $3 million. Now, all of a sudden, it turns out it's $8 million. And there are people starting to ask questions about, you know, and I think it is a response to the Nick Shirley thing and others. What exactly do you do for that money and where did it come from? Who wrote those checks? How did this happen? People are starting to take a look, and these people are starting to sweat. I think that it is starting to happen.
Well, they're starting to, because the Nick Shirley phenomenon, or before him, Project Veritas, showed that, okay, you could be your own investigative reporter. I mean, it's obviously not going to be done by the conventional media.
Right.
They don't care. They're corrupt. I mean, and here's what bothers me. Where are all these people that go to journalism school? that wanted to be the next Woodward and Bernstein, they're all phony. It's all BS.
Well,
Okay.
I mean,
Why did they find this?
because they have been taught since, I think, I mean, this is an interesting subject. It goes back to the 60s, but they were taught that they're not really, journalism is now activism. They are there to promote the agenda. I mean, Lester Holt kind of admitted this during his award ceremony, right? He's going to spill the beans by saying, the days of objective journalism are really passé, he says, and I'm paraphrasing. Now we have to be active because of the way the world is. A lot of these people are open. Scott Pelley is another one. What a phony. I mean, very openly hates Trump and says, that's my job. We have to stop Trump. So this is what they're teaching in journalism school. This is what they're doing. This is why it's falling apart. And this is why you need people like Nick Shirley and others to step into the vacuum and actually do journalism. Get out there and walk around and do stories. People want that. And I think it's happening. And they can't stop it because, the media is such now, even though it's restrictive, even though YouTube is censoring, sure, it's still more open now than ever. They can't totally censor it.
Well, they're getting more open because guys like Shirley are getting views and are getting ad revenue.
No, and he's gotten millions of views. I think he's made money from it. I hope he has. Why not? I'd like to see.
Well, generally, if you get up to the point where you have 1 million subs, you can make that your livelihood.
Yeah, and that's encouraging other people to jump into it. There's a guy in Maine now doing this, looking at the Somalis. There's a couple of people here in Boston are starting to walk around a little. I'm thinking about doing it. Why not go out and you can just simply go.
I was going to suggest that because you have that kind of affable personality where somehow you would be able to get into someone's face and they wouldn't get upset, at least at first.
All you have to do is go to your city hall or go to the State House, and you can get a list of all of the autism agencies, whatever it is, and walk around and check these people out. That's all Nick Shirley did. He had a list right from the city hall of, daycare centers, and he walked in, knocked on the door. Hey, how you doing? I want to sign my son Joey up for daycare. Oh, will he fit in here? Where are the other children? That's all. It's very simple, and people are doing it, and they can't stop it. And I think that these things, the fact that the ICE is taking the criminals off the street and crime is dropping in the cities that are cooperating, and even in the certain cities that Boston actually is cooperating, but quietly. The police department is. Michelle Wu is a real radical, the mayor, and she's going to stand up and say the stupidest things. Recently she declares that all people in the world have a right to come here as refugees. This is, I don't know, maybe she probably wants to run for, I think she wants Elizabeth Warren's seat. Elizabeth Warren was her mentor. But the point is that quietly they're working with ICE and they're getting it done in Boston. That's how Boston rolls. And I think that it's making a difference. The murder rate is down, the robbery rate is down, the violence is down, crime is dropping, and it's a direct result not only of ICE, but also of President Trump federalizing the National Guard in Washington, D.C. and some other cities. And this is going to augur well for him and for the Republicans, even though most of them are worthless. But it's going to augur well for them in November. That, and I also think that I'd like to see more of this, but he is not letting go of voter fraud in the 2020 election. I've been following this, as you know, regularly since then, and I'm not done.
What is the latest with this Fulton County pre-printed ballot thing?
There's testimony now that they basically this guy Favorito was able to get hundreds of thousands of ballots impounded and held in a warehouse. Those ballots would have otherwise been destroyed, as they probably were in Detroit and in Milwaukee, and in Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. So we probably aren't going to get to the bottom there. But he was able to get them preserved because he was able to get it before a judge that actually had some integrity. And now they are seized by the FBI because they wouldn't release them. And it's going to result in an exposure because President Trump was obviously right about that. There were 400,000 ballots that have not been properly vetted or counted. The majority of them are probably not valid. And that Trump won the state. He won the whole country in a landslide, obviously.
Well, let me ask you this.
Wait a
How
minute.
many
This
of
is,
the
by the way, before we go on, I want to just say to TikTok, bye-bye, TikTok. We're not going to go on. This is a no-no for TikTok. So before I get a strike, I'm going to just shut it down myself. So thanks for
that's a record, Chuck. 45 minutes.
Yeah, but I'm not going. I know that it's coming. So this is a no-no. You can't talk about elections on TikTok. So bye-bye,
Right.
TikTok. Okay.
But okay, here's the question. The Fulton County stuff comes out, other stuff comes out. At what point is the elite media going to stop using the canned expression, and Trump claims, dash, dash, without evidence, dash, dash, that there was this and that fraud? How many of these things are going to have?
And they're going to continue to. I mean, they're just locked into it. They know damn well the election was stolen. They're just not, because it's just too much at stake. This is where everything is. All the bodies are buried on that issue, and they're going to go right. They'll go down to the grave with that one. But the point is that it is moving forward, not just in Fulton County, but all over. It is moving forward. They are, and even in now you have Congress debating the Voter ID Act. I don't trust Thune. Something about him. I think he's being blackmailed. He's been compromised. He started out as a very high moral Christian senator.
Yeah.
I remember I met him once at when I was running. Super charismatic and come to Jesus and a lot of religious talk, which tells me that there might be something else going on. I mean, oftentimes when somebody is that pious publicly, you kind of have to look under the hood a little bit. Now, look, I'm not making any accusations. There is something about him that I just think he is sold out to this establishment. He doesn't, he's dragging his feet on Trump's nominations, and he's just not playing ball. And so I'm worried about, the idea of a basic voter ID is popular with something like 85% of the American people every time it's polled. It's very nonpartisan. It's something that just people want to stop voter suppression. It just makes basic sense. And up until 2019, it was championed by people like Elizabeth Warren and Amy Klobuchar and other liberals. This was something they completely took an about face, of course. But nevertheless, if they know damn well that if they get that done, and even that bill is not perfect, it could be better, but it's good enough, that is going to stop illegal aliens from voting. And that is going to be a major blow to the Democratic Party. It's just a political calculation.
I don't think anybody disagrees with the proposition that if they're not allowed to cheat, they're done.
Right. And so I think it's probably something that we're just going to have to, it's going to be a cliffhanger. It's going to be voted on any day now in the next week or two. And I don't know how it's going to go, but we really have to ask people, if you're listening to this show, to contact Senator Thune or contact your Republican senator. Forget about contacting Elizabeth Warren. That's not worth your, don't waste your breath. But contact people who are going to vote for this. Maybe, I don't know. Some of the Republicans, they actually don't care if they lose. They just hate Trump so much. And that's a problem. But if you really pound them enough and really with calls and they do respond to that. And It's
I
very,
think one reason that there's so much Trump derangement syndrome is that, I mean, take a sports team analogy. Okay. You've been an athlete all your life and you worked out and you've been taught to do something in a certain way. And all of a sudden, this guy comes in and maybe he's not batting 1,000, but he's batting 800. You think, well, this is impossible. Ted Williams could only do 400 back a million years ago. And we hate him for his success because how come I can't be that guy? You know,
yeah,
it's
so fast.
just pathetic.
It's that's the whole motivation for somebody like a Mitt Romney. It's just sour grapes.
Yeah.
He couldn't do it. He was weak. He should have done it. He looks back now and he wishes he had, and he's bitter.
Oh, without a doubt.
And
Here was a guy. He had the looks. He had the money. He had a certain amount of charisma, but he just didn't have the balls. I mean, let's be honest.
he choked.
Yeah.
He didn't have the nerve to stand up to the New York Times and the Boston Globe, and it's and he regrets it. So he hates
Yeah.
Trump for that. I mean, that's because Trump has changed
Makes sense.
the whole way things are done. I wish that when I ran, I wish I knew Trump, because I would have done things differently. We all are locked into this sort of hypnotic fealty to this establishment way of speaking, way of thinking, and Trump has completely thrown that out the window. And you have a guy like Newsom or some of these other people that are trying to be like Trump. They throw in a few vulgarities, and it just doesn't work for them because that's not who they are. They can't. I mean, Trump is the real McCoy, and I think that that kind of honesty. The first comment that he made publicly that made me realize how different he was when you had that skunk, Chris Wallace's son, one of the worst pieces of human excrement in the media. He's gone, thank God.
A quick observation, as bad as the first generation is in these things, the second is often worse.
Oh, he was just the most dreadful figure. But he asked Trump, he goes, how are you going to answer to the fact that you're richer than you're rich? Mitt Romney got in trouble for this or something like that. And how and Trump said, oh, Mitt Romney's not really rich. I'm rich. And it was like you just could see that he had a different way of looking at things.
Yeah.
He wasn't going to play this kind of game that, where like Elizabeth Warren, to Besson, she's like, oh, didn't Trump say that people who care about transparency, that's a hoax? Or some bull crap like that. I mean, he's like, hey, he's talking about Biden. He's not talking about it's like they've changed the way they communicate now.
Yeah.
And it's
it was about time. I mean,
yeah.
I remember talking to Sununu Sr. many, many years ago. And I would ask the question, like, why do you let the media, lead you by the nose? Why don't you talk back to the media? Oh, no, you can't do that. It would ruin your reputation. I'm thinking, what a pussy.
Yeah.
I mean,
Trump doesn't care. I mean, he just, and nor has he ever cared. I mean, if you read his book, The Art of the Deal, I mean, which I read like 20 years ago, and I was impressed. He has his own way of communicating. He doesn't give a goddamn about what anybody thinks about it. He's a very independent, classic American thinker and operator, and it's really changed the way. And they don't know what to do about it, which is driving them crazy. That's why they despise and fear Trump. He's honest to a fault. He just
really won't play by the marks of the Queensberry rules that they've been able to geld every other politician with.
Right. And I think that now, I hope that it's all going to finally come out against the Democrats in the midterms, between the deportation of the criminals, the exposure of the voter fraud that and the passage of the SAVE Act, I think it's called, which will end illegal aliens voting. I think the Jeffrey Epstein thing has backfired on them. Now you have every one
Yeah,
of them.
it was funny. It was the Democrats crying about release the files. Now they're saying stop.
Yeah, and I don't know how that man kept so many files. I mean, 3.5 million files, and they're not even done. They've got
Well,
another.
it's not all his. I mean, these are all FBI reports.
Yeah.
And there's even stuff where people called in making random complaints. They're just documents like hell.
But it's completely backfired on them. I mean, it's, it looks terrible. I mean, he was involved in some really sinister things, with Harvard and MIT, and wanting his DNA to be infected across humanity. And just, you don't hear them talk anymore. You don't hear Harvard used to have a whole website with all their professors talking about transhumanism. They've taken it down. I wish
I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
Oh, and it had the most chilling stuff on it. This is when Jeffrey Epstein was still involved. And he was deeply involved in that. He had an office at Harvard. They were all with him, not just Larry Summers. And MIT also. And he had his hand in everything. I mean, he was like all over the world. I mean, it was a huge blackmail operation. I mean, it involved stuff that we can't even imagine. I mean, everything that was said about it, including, and even like, you remember Pizzagate, not to get into a subject, but all these things are turning out to have been completely true. And it's all coming out as people go over these documents and they find out some of the stuff that the establishment was doing with cloning and with, just sexual stuff that's unbelievable. And it's, and it's backfiring big time on the Democrats.
Oh, you're seeing it everywhere. This guy, Casey Wasserman, who's the head of the LA 2028 Olympic Committee, there's mass calls for him to resign because he's mentioned in these files. Yeah,
Mamdani's mother is in there somehow. And there's pictures.
Really?
Yes. Mamdani's mother was a movie maker who was making a deal with Jeffrey Epstein. And it's very embarrassing. And there's pictures now with her and Jeffrey Epstein with Mamdani as a 10-year-old boy standing next to her. And it's very embarrassing. And who knows? I mean, there's all these other names. I mean, the View, right? Those harpies, Whoopi Goldberg, they were all involved with Jeffrey Epstein. This one that the one from the Virgin Islands, I mean, she's there texting with Jeffrey Epstein while she was testifying.
Plasko. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's all, and there's going to be more. And it's mostly liberal Democrats. A couple of rhinos mixed in. They say that, what's his name? The Secretary of Commerce.
Lutkin.
Lutkin, yeah. He went to Epstein Island, but he was with his wife and children. I mean, it's not like, who knows why he was there, but probably nothing that terrible. I mean, he was like on vacation. I don't know. But
it's like an odd place to go on vacation.
Yes, I think so. Who knows? But anyhow.
So you're right. I mean, this is the civilizational shift, and I hope it continues.
Indeed, and I think that it's taking on a critical mass. It's going to be hard, as John Ehrlichman famously said during Watergate, when John Dean was about to testify before Congress, and he went to John Ehrlichman to consult. What should I say? What should I do? And Ehrlichman said, just remember, once the toothpaste is out of the tube, you can't get it back. And that's what's happened here. The toothpaste is out of the tube. They're not going to turn things
Yeah.
around. You can't go back now. It's too late. It's beyond President Trump himself. Hopefully, thank God, he's well, and that there's a big victory in November, and he's able to go forward, and then hopefully get another, if he doesn't serve another term, someone like him. And that's why this is so important, this next election.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
I mean, it's really that critical, because if they're able to steal that election, or if they're somehow able to get a majority in the House or in the Senate, and even if it's just by one or two, it's going to be very ugly. I mean, there's going to be impeachments, imprisonments. If we think it was bad under the Biden regime, it's, they're going to put people in prison now. They put hundreds of people in prison then. It's going to be like a real, talk about fascism. I mean, I just think that there's just a lot at stake. Even if you
No,
have,
absolutely. But I will leave you with this piece of good news.
yeah,
Everybody knows about the Billie Eilish. You can't be. No one's illegal on stolen land. Okay. Well, it bit her in the ass big time already.
yeah,
Never mind the protests from the Tongva tribe, whose land she's living on. She was fired from Toy Story 5. She was supposed to do a song in it. And even the lunatics at Disney are seeing this bad publicity,
that whole
which they
thing,
can't take anymore.
that whole thing had no ratings. And the other one was, who was this Mambuzi guy or somebody? He made some comments that were just typical meaningless liberal claptrap about, we have to honor built by immigrants, blah blah blah. And he's gotten in trouble with a big
Yeah.
backlash because he didn't mention black people. I mean, just saying how crazy they are. And he's black, but it's I mean, I just think that whole mindset is,
Well, I think it's very interesting that the guy that was now going to be the new Disney CEO was promoted up from being the head of the theme parks. And the theme park's the only thing that made money in Disneyland for the last five years.
right. It's the only thing that actually worked.
So the reason that Billie Eilish got canned on that movie, they cannot continue losing money on all these movies.
Right. I mean, what was that other one that they did with the actress was just completely, woke and.
Oh, Rachel Zegler. Well, now they're calling Billie Eilish the new Rachel Zegler, this sort of insufferable, liberal, left-wing, white female with no life experience that has an opinion on everything and doesn't know when to keep her goddamn mouth shut. I mean, it's like she was cloned,
And it's just not working for them. And I think that, when we talk about this, I wonder if average people are aware of it. Do average people in this country know the corruption going on in Minneapolis and in Los Angeles and in Maine and here in my own state of Massachusetts?
Probably not.
Do they know about the election fraud in Fulton County, and that this is all coming out? I mean, I don't think they do, because I think
they make your drips and drabs. You got to remember, Chuck, other people have lives.
Right.
They're not
focused on this.
News addicts, but I think it trickles down. Okay, you can talk to normies, and they've got some of this. All right.
Well, that's the question. I mean, can we shave off enough of them? And I do think that it's bubbling more. As I said, and I'm optimistic, people are starting to talk in Massachusetts about the Healy hotels, and this $2.5 billion missing. She spent it all, it looks like, on illegal aliens, giving them GBT cards, giving them cash allowances, computers, meals, cars, hotels, and people are going to be PO'd when this comes out, because why? At the expense, I mean, why is this a virtue? These are not poor people. they ship them into the state, and they can't really explain this policy of what this is about. So I actually think that it's going to get interesting in the state.
Yeah.
And I think that that is bubbling under all over the United States right now. You're going to see Democrats either shifting to the right and not getting away with it, or I don't know, like this new governor of Virginia, didn't she just like raise taxes and she's like gave salary increases to everybody in her office? And now she's declaring sanctuary state. It's the old left wing playbook. I don't know how that's going to work there. I don't know. I mean,
no, it's good. Well, I mean, Virginia was a special case. Many years ago, it used to be a Republican stronghold. But what happened was that there's two Virginias, right? There's Northern Virginia, Fairfax County, Loudoun County, Arlington County, where all the government employees. And then there's the rest of the state, which is real Virginia. So it's disproportionate that way. But it's even starting to backfire in Fairfax County. All right. They've gotten so woke and so weird in their public schools that it's going to explode.
Well, they're doing the whole transgender thing, which I think is not popular, and it's not working for people who have a daughter on a sports team and is going to have her head bashed in by some greasy guy stripping in the locker room. I mean, it's just not rational. And all of these things I think are coming back to really bite them. I mean, I hope President Trump arresting Maduro, hugely popular amongst Hispanics.
Yeah.
It's one of these great moves. And I think that you're going to see Cuba maybe collapse in the next months or so, because President Trump is tightening the screws, and you got Rubio, who's a real kind of Latin American nationalist. You've got conservative governments elected in Costa Rica, Honduras. You already have them in Guatemala and Panama. And now you have one in Chile. And I think even Peru has gone conservative. So you have movements in terms of understanding that the United States is the linchpin of the Western Hemisphere. And likewise in other parts of the world. China even, I understand, is having some instability internally. So these are all things that are reverberations of what we're talking about in terms of civilizational shift, the reassertion of sovereignty.
Sure.
And so anyways, what do you have coming up, Mike, on your?
I've been kind of off for a couple of weeks.
Okay.
Working on some stuff with, we still have a day job and customers and things like that.
Yeah.
But there's been so much stuff going on. I start writing a piece, and then it sounds like old news, So
every day it's like Christmas Day. You wake up and it's like, who knows what's going to be going on now?
Yeah.
So it's all good. Anyway,
it is.
So we'll talk next week, and have a good one, and God bless America.